Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of the Noiseblast Hour by Noise Engineering. I'm your guest host and doer of many things here at Noise Engineering, Chris Kaiser. Today on the show, we are happy to have Adam Cuthbert, and we have Norm of Normandy Falls. So, without further ado, take it away. So we're here with Adam Cuthbert, who just gave us 2 incredible performances. Those were really stunning. Thank you for those. The first thing I always like to do is ask people to walk us through, in this case, 2 pieces that you sent us.
Sure. So the first piece was just me twisting knobs. That was a piece called Four Vox by my friend Daniel Rhode. And that was actually a composition for my modular, which has 4 drum voices and 2 oscillators. This is part of a greater conversation where Dan and I have been inviting our friends to write like notated compositions for our modular synth rigs. So we started the project by writing each other a piece kind of in our own styles, but with the idea of like what each other's modular rigs like had inside it. So he wrote me this piece that was, as the title suggests, 4 voices. And they were all kind of like out polyrhythms. And the game was just so he knows what voices I have, and in this case it was a mutant bass drum, it was the Pico Drum 2, the Detroit Underground Carpless Menchie Carpless synth, and what was the 2 HP hi-hats. So I don't think I even used my oscillators for this one. It was just the 4 drum voices. And so the sequence rhythms are coming in through Ableton via my Sleepers FH2. Those go into the drum voices, and the game is just I play with timbre the whole time, and the rhythms kind of come. The rhythms are predetermined, and I can advance in cells up and down with Ableton. So like when I'm done with like a certain rhythmic cycle, I can just hit one button and it advances to the next scene, and then the piece sort of develops a little bit like that. And that was the first piece.
Very cool. And for viewers that are longtime Noiseblast viewers, they'll know that Daniel Rhode played last Noiseblast. So if you missed that, go check his piece out.
That's right. He played my piece last month on Noiseblast. So we're returning the favor now. Thank you for having this experiment occupy 2 episodes on the show. Yeah, we can talk more about that one later.
For sure.
And then the second piece, it's not really titled. It was actually the last composition I made. I don't even want to call it a composition. It was, it was 8 minutes of a 45-minute free verse. My favorite 8 minutes of that's a lot of how I end up recording sometimes. This was you notice it was the video was in an empty room with I was moving out of New York City. Actually, if this isn't announced by the time this video airs, spoilers, I don't live in New York anymore. I live in Detroit now, for various reasons. But that was kind of my last night in the empty apartment. Most of it had been moved out, except of course my synthesizer had to be the last thing to be deconstructed. My audio rack and my synth. And that was kind of like a farewell piece to the space I had been like. This had been my like creative space, the east bedroom on Rogers Avenue, 3rd floor, for like almost 5 years. That was my creative kind of like sanctuary, and so I wanted to just kind of send it off the right way, I guess. Then the overlaid video over that was just a street shot from the other bedroom. It was kind of, well, that video is actually not from the exact same time. There's a little studio magic because there's snow in the video. Obviously, it wasn't this month. I thought it was rain when I pulled it out, and I'm like, oh, I can totally just like put the rainy video on and it works. But it actually was raining that night. It was just a different storm. But I wanted to just kind of put together something that was really like I will remember this place, and I'll probably never be in this space ever again. So it felt like I needed to send it off the right way. So that's my like farewell piece.
It was, I thought it was really powerful and really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what you were using in that piece?
Oh, yeah. So, okay, there's studio magic a little bit. I cheated. Sorry. I didn't have to say that. I'm too honest about it.
I mean, there's nothing
really,
saying it has to be modular for the Noiseblast.
it was modular. It just was a couple of takes of modular, and then a little bit arranged. So it was just a very simple patch using is in a Clouds Monsoon. I use the bubble sound amplifier to send my horn into the modular. And there's a closed bell amplifier made by Yamaha called the Silent Brass. So all of it's a small in-bell amplifier. So you don't hear any acoustic trumpet. It all goes through the system through just like it goes through a little amp box, and it was sort of developed so like parents can give their fifth grader a opportunity to practice without annoying them in the other room, which I think is why they made this thing. But if you don't send your audio to like the headphones jack, you just send it into your modular rig or your guitar pedal rig, it essentially becomes like a guitar rig kind of situation.
Very cool.
So that goes into the modular, and then through the mutant bass drums distortion circuit, there's another channel for the Clouds Monsoon. There's another channel for the DSP, and I'm just mixing those a little bit on the fly as we go, toggling on and off those three channels as I play, heavy reverb and everything. And what I ended up doing with this is like I had to move, so I recorded the raw trumpet and the just the stereo output from the synth of like all these sounds, all these verby sounds, and then I brought it home, and I just finished it this week actually. The final like master pass was a few additional layers of sending that raw trumpet back through the synth, and then kind of being more hands-on with the parameters, and playing through the filters and performing some more like timbral variation that I had. Then I arranged them all together in a kind of a sound landscape that felt a little bit more interesting than just set it and forget it as it was at the beginning. But it stays synced with the video the whole time. So in a way, it is still a performance. It's just there's a little bit more going on. There's also field recordings. I hung my Zoom recorder out the window in the other bedroom to grab the just the city street sounds, a little bit of rain and traffic, because that's kind of just like the bleed is something I had lived with in that space for like 5 years too. It felt very like central to the location, and if I was going to do a piece that was kind of like capturing a location and like how I feel about the space in this time, like I needed some Brooklyn grit inside the recording also.
Definitely. I love it. So you just moved to Detroit from New York City, where you were for quite some time.
10 years.
Wow. Where were you before New York?
I came to New York directly after undergrad. I went to Grand Valley State University in Grand Rapids, Michigan, for my music composition undergrad. Did not get into any grad schools. I'm really bad at piano. Oh man, now I'm thinking about the awful like the entrance interviews where I had to like sight read Schubert piano songs, and just like plunking through this like bullet, like it's just like so clear that I like don't know what I'm doing. Please just like wait, just tell me that's enough so I can stop, kind of thing. I didn't get into grad school, so I just moved to New York because that's where like a lot of the inspiring musicians that I knew from undergrad through GVSU's like very robust new music ensemble and new music contemporary composition studio. Bill Ryan is the music director there, who's a brilliant soul. Kept us all plugged into kind of like what was going on in the big cities as well, while we were like out in the cornfields. So when I was done with school, I'm like, okay, I didn't get to like get into any grad schools that I was excited to go to. I don't want to really try to do that. I just want to like go and like write and like see what kind of community I can find. So I just moved to New York cold then, and I had a couple unpaid internships lined up, and one thing led to another, and eventually became I began working in the contemporary classical music industry side, first as like an assistant publicist, then as I would send out the mail order like CDs or manage the online store for Bang on a Can, and that eventually led to like a position with Bang on a Can's record label, Cantaloupe Music. And then I did sales for the label for a while, and that turned into like music licensing, getting like our catalog into ads and TV and film. And lately I've also been doing a little bit of mix engineering and like audio engineering for label projects as well. And then I took that job back to Detroit with me because everything is remote now in the COVID era.
Pretty much. Do you want to mention a little bit about what Bang on a Can is?
Yeah, Bang on a Can is a very interesting and unique, multifaceted music and arts organization. It started as a like an all day long concert back in 1988. Back when New York City was very segregated between the uptowners and the downtowners, and the uptowners were like, you know, the Columbia University, the heady academic music crowd, and the downtowners were like the avant-garde free jazz and like a little bit of punk rock influences. And it was very much a like, you're this one or that one. Back when Bang on a Can started, and the three founding composers, David Lang, Julia Wolf, and Michael Gordon, were like, this is dumb. Like, why all this music is good, so let's program it all in like a mega concert. And their first concert had like a whole lot of momentum around it. They did it again, and then they did it again, and eventually it gained a lot of traction, and it helped kind of fuse the New York scenes into like a greater, like it encouraged more cross pollination among aesthetics and everything. So then, you know, somewhere along the line, they have their own house ensemble. It's the sextet, the Bang on a Can All Stars, kind of like was the champion ensemble for this kind of rep. Then what happened next? The Bang on a Can Summer Festival, which is like a professional development course for composers and musicians, artists who are wanting to carry the torch of this kind of aesthetic. It takes place except for this past year, every summer in the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art in North Adams, Massachusetts. So just a beautiful, like huge warehouse metropolis full of contemporary art. And then we play music around these galleries and just kind of let the inspirations flow. Yeah, and then eventually they made a label, and it's just, there's just a wing and everything now. Like any kind of like, there's their publishing company is under the same roof. So it's like a little piece of every like step of the music industry pie is kind of Bang on a Can's current existence.
So if any of the people watching this don't know about Bang on a Can and some of the things that they do and some of the music that they support and present, I just please go check them out, because I'm a massive fangirl. So that's quite a trajectory. How would you say that all of those things have influenced the music that you make? And I understand you've also performed under a wide range of pseudonyms on a wide range of platforms. How would you say that your music,
Yeah.
How has your trajectory both evolved with that, and how has your style evolved across all of those different pseudonyms? It's a lot to ask in one go.
That's a big question. Where do we start? I guess at first I should say that like when I went to classical music school when I was a baby, I just finished high school and I'm like, what do I do? Like I had fun playing in band and whatever. I think I'll major in music, but the thing that like got me excited to like go into music was not ever classical music. It was like video game music. It was like game scores, like Legend of Zelda scores and like Final Fantasy and like Phantasy Star Online, like kind of like Sega and Nintendo games with like sick soundtracks. And like I played the trumpet, which is a monophonic melodic instrument. So like part of my like extracurricular was always like I'm not like going out to like try to practice a concerto. I just want to figure out how to play these like sick melodies from my favorite games. And like
Nice.
that was like my extracurricular like music pursuits. And then that eventually led me to like Finale notation software, and like that eventually brought me to composition. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, if you want to do this, if you want to like get good at this stuff, you have to go through the classical music track. So I got to classical music school pretty much cold without really having like an education on like the classical canon, which I eventually found out was very old and very white and very rigid. And that's a whole other thing. So like that was always kind of like a thing that I brought into classical music with me. And so when I linked up with Bang and I Can, they were also kind of like rebelling against like the high ivory tower of the academic circuit. And they were like, oh, well, rock bands are actually really sick too. And like punk music and techno and everything. And like, these are all like valid like art forms. And like, so what do we get when we cross that with like people who have, gone through the very rigid academic like curriculum? So like there's certain like really cool skills that you get at classical music school. Like notating music is a pretty like universal thing, and like it's like kind of a language that you can use to communicate to other people like what you want music to sound like on a theoretical standpoint. Those are all really important things.
Sure.
But it also requires a tremendous amount of like capital up front to, you got to hire musicians. That's not cheap because they got to practice your stuff. They got to like go to the recording studio. You got to hire, like you got to book a venue, or you got to book a recording space. Like that stuff really adds up. And like in classical music land, you really like, you don't get to do that stuff unless you're independently wealthy, or if you have like grants. If you are granted the capital to do your project after appealing to a panel of usually like doctorate kind of people who I think have like, they have something in mind of what they're looking for. And it's never what I'm doing. So, but we don't have to talk about that. So my first gig in town was actually, a friend of mine put me in touch with somebody who was curating a series, and they were like, we heard some of your recordings. Like, do you want to play a solo set like at this venue in Brooklyn? I said, absolutely, yeah, I do. Oh, this is my big break, whatever. I had no idea what I was gonna do. I play the trumpet. I can't just play trumpet by itself for 30 minutes. This is so boring. So like, how do I? Sorry.
Sorry.
No, it's valid. It's valid. It's like, so how do I turn trumpet into something that like you want to listen to for a whole set? Because I don't have the money. I'm like flat ass broke. Like I'm eating spinach sandwiches for every meal because like I don't have a job yet. I just like so I gotta make like 30 to 45 minutes of like music all by myself. What's that gonna sound like? And that's when I brought in the Yamaha Silent Brass Mute, plugged that into an audio interface directly into Ableton. I'm like, okay, so now I have access to all the Ableton tools. I have the looper, I have the MIDI controllers, I have all like a palette of like time sound effects. This should be enough, right? Okay, I can use the the session view to kind of create like a timeline of in Ableton the session view, it's like each scene is kind of like a rehearsal bar in a notated score. So like I'm gonna play the material at like letter A or like letter C, whatever. You hit the button and okay, we're in letter C. Like some accompanying sounds are going on, and I can play, through Antares auto tune, and nobody can hear that I can't really tune very well. And then I can flush it through it full of reverb and capture that in a loop. Grab my Novation Launchpad and like boom 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 map all these buttons to like different stuff on the looper. And suddenly you can transpose the looper up and down, and so like this instrument that used to be just like 2 octaves, basically you get 2 good octaves on the trumpet, I can send that down and like stretch it out and like make a long foundation and then start building up like whole landscapes with this monophonic instrument. And I figured that was like, okay, that's my break, I can figure this out. So I played that set and it was really fun. Some friends came to visit to see the set, and then this theater director was at the show, and he was kind of like, do you make like hybrid electronic ambient compositions all the time? And I'm like, well, yeah, you can say it all the time. This was literally my first show, but like, yeah, I do this all the time. Absolutely.
Totally.
So we started linking up, and I started doing like sound design and like composition for experimental theater scores. And then I got into to meet some friends in like the theater and dance worlds. And they love electronic music, and I was able to like do whole shows of scores on my own, just with the tools that I had, just the minimal tools that I had. And I didn't have to worry about hiring expensive ensembles or like going to like a recording studio and like shelling out thousands and thousands. It was just kind of like a scrappy DIY trajectory from there, where you learn a little bit of what you need to, and you make your path based on that. So we were going to talk about pseudonyms at a certain point. Yeah, at a certain point, like I came to New York and I was like so gung-ho. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be Adam Cuthbert, the composer. I can do these things. I write music, and I do classical, blah, blah, blah. Commission me to write your string quartet. Commission me to write your wind quintet or something. Didn't always really, like I did a few of those things, but it never quite worked out. I was more interested in like, okay, what do I do with this mapped up Ableton looper and my trumpet? But that didn't really ever feel like, it didn't feel like classical music. I wasn't sure, like, oh, do I put my name on this and put this next to my string quartet? It's like, it doesn't sound at all the same. And this was back when SoundCloud was cool.
There was a time?
There was a moment where I made friends on SoundCloud. Like I would listen through people and people would leave comments on the waveform. It was so much fun. And like I met some people there, and like eventually played shows with somebody I met on SoundCloud, and like I just tried to plug in that place. And at a certain point, like it started to feel like, everyone's SoundCloud page is like one aesthetic, and so like, do I need another SoundCloud page to like experiment and put out this other stuff, which felt very much like an alter ego, or is like a separate identity, or like an alternative identity or something. So I made my pseudonym, which was Kuuma, which was long story short, it's like a kanji inversion of my name. In like, my Japanese friend gave me kanji, and if you flip it upside down and invert it, it goes from Adam to Kuuma. So that's where that came from. And I just started kind of like low key dropping tracks on that, and they were very like raw and kind of unfinished. And I just honed that whole like style with this pseudonym. And like, I think it was like, it's not like fully anonymous. It was like pretty much like people knew it was me. Maybe some people knew it was me. I don't know. I knew it was me. But eventually that started feeling like like a whole different like identity. And that's kind of also when I was like looking at like the gender binary too, of being like, this feels like I'm this is like masculine and feminine sounds. Like, I don't know, I feel like it's a very intuitive thing, but like I ended up just started collating like my feminine feeling music there and my masculine feeling music here. For me, it was always like just like a pursuit towards an intuition of like, these are sounds that are reflective of emotions that I was kind of told like men shouldn't like fuck with this. It's too soft. It's too like it's too emotional. It's too soft. And I always just felt like, I don't like, this feels authentic though. This is like, this feels more authentic than what I'm doing over here, with that I'm like trying to like fit into something. So I'm going to keep doing this, but I don't know what it means. And it wasn't until like years later did I like understand enough of the like gender vocabulary to be like, oh, this is what I'm talking about. This gender fluidity. This is like non-binary. This is the gray area in between. This is like being attuned to the gray area, where I can kind of draw on both of these things and not feel like I can't like express this side because it's not what I am.
How did you end up finding your way into modular?
Where did I start with modular? I really feel like, well, I had some friends who were like, yo, I just got modules. It's really fun. You got to check it out. So I was starting to get a little bit of like, come over and like check out the synthesizer. This is really interesting. This is a whole new paradigm. I think you'd really vibe with it. So I had a few friends that I would like kind of come through to like learn a little bit about their modules, and I would always kind of really just be like so overwhelmed at like, the price tags and also the mess of cables and the signal flow was not something that was part of my curriculum either.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I came to Ableton was very much like, it was kind of a necessary step away from like the pen and paper classical music. So it was like my crash course into Ableton was very much like, I'll drop a module onto the track and see what it sounds like, and like play with parameters, and eventually figure out a more professional like mixing system from there. But it got to the point where I was using a lot of Max for Live devices in Ableton, doing like LFO modulations and various like CV tools that would cause the sound to be animated. A lot of that stuff I was doing manually in performances, and so I felt like I had to always be just like twisting knobs and like pressing buttons and like doing all these things at once, and it was like this very kinetic, almost kind of exhausting. And I would like, even my friends would sometimes say that like there's such a weird disconnect because you're putting out this really like soft, consonant, cute ambient music, and I'm just like up here just like sweating, like doing all these levers and stuff, and like there's this weird dissonance. And the more I learned about modular, I'm like, okay, there's just a thing that's like sending a signal that's doing this at all times, and you just open the valve and you send it to where you need it to be. So this is going to save me a lot of clicks. I can actually like twist the knobs. I don't have to make a MIDI instrument from scratch every single time and like map it to a MIDI controller, Novation controller or something. I got a secondhand 104 HP skiff that came with like some mults and an audio interface, and I bought a Mannequin Sisters, which is still like my favorite module. Things brilliant.
We love that one too.
I'll just get a filter. It can self-oscillate. I can mess with it then, and then like I was just like making jams with literally that one module, like multing and then like back into itself, and I'm like, okay, this is fun, but it's like it's not like functionally like doing it. So I went back to the store and I got a Max. I don't remember what I got after that. Just like the slow and steady. build, and then before I knew it, I had a whole row that was pretty much rolling. I really love just like, I'll set up a patch, I'll get to know that patch for a while, I'll like revise it a little bit, I'll put it in a spreadsheet, and then just like live with that patch for a month or so, generate a lot of music, produce some things with it, and then scrap it and start over. And it's kind of like a living, breathing thing. You can kind of put your 10,000 hours into like a single patch and like a single workflow if you want to, or it can be just like a thing for exploration every time you come to it.
So you mentioned putting something into the spreadsheet and whatever, but so that kind of brings me back to something that we talked about earlier, which is, so you and Daniel have been working on this musical notation for modular. And one of the biggest complaints that I hear about modular, which is entirely valid, is that it can be really difficult to, like, you make a sound and then it was really cool, but then you lost it and you can't reproduce it and there's no undo button. So tell us about this notation. How does it work? What is it? Like, whatever you want to share about it.
Yeah, sure. I guess we should do a very brief history lesson about this composer Conlon Nancarrow. From he was a American expat, moved to Mexico in like the 50s, and he was kind of his like, one of his big projects for a while was composing music for player pianos, which are like those little like metal rolls that will like flick the notes to makes the piano play by itself. He was kind of fed up with the limitations of like only 10 fingers on this piano, and like I can't get a human being to like actualize the rhythms or the sounds or like the density that I'm looking for. So I'm gonna write for this machine. And he composed these songs for piano that like it was just for the piano roll. And so he made the piano roll, and then the piano would play this like otherworldly kind of like impossible to play as a human kind of music with that's just like way too many like polyrhythmic like layers, or just like too many notes for a single human's hands. And that was like his vibe, and like it was later on, like his music's been arranged for ensembles, and it's like, okay, it takes 6 people to play his piano music.
Wow.
I always thought that was like a really fascinating approach to it, of like it's almost like getting into like cyborg kind of stuff, like augmented human things. And okay, yeah, that's within the ethos of like techno and synthesizers too. But I feel like kind of our synthesizers are kind of like modern player pianos also, where like I sort of see it as it's like a sound box that will generate like all these infinite sounds, but you can still, like with the advent of modules like the FH2 or the what's the Mutant Brain, Noise Engineering is working on one. I forget what y'all's
the UI
called. The UI. So like you hook it up to a computer and you can sequence it just like the way Nancarrow did with like you can feed it all these polyrhythms and stuff that like you can't like actually play this stuff. It's really just too fast. Or it's like too, like in Dan's case, Dan is super into just layers and layers and layers of polyrhythms that like are probably like brain frying to try to like keep track of all of these. Like even like, I mean, I've seen some incredible drummers that can keep like a different polypulse in all 4 limbs. But then like even just like 9/32 and then like a 12/39 and like just like all these kind of wild like repeating things in Dan's music. That's kind of what like it's one of his like favorite composer techniques. So his piece for me was very much like, here are all these rhythms. You don't have to play the rhythms, just play with the timbres. And then in that way, I guess it doesn't solve the problem you're talking about of once you find the sound and you lose it, it's gone forever. That's why I kind of also just almost always have record going, just in case, I also have like gigabytes full of like a terabyte of like shit that I still need to like sift through to like cut the juicy nuggets out. Who knows if I'll ever do it on some of those recordings, but anyway, so like, I mean, that's one thing. I'll just like always be recording because you never know what might come through. And it doesn't really solve that, but I think for me, I'm maybe like the sounds that you make on your modular synth are also like really kind of unique and personal. Like everybody's got their own like sonic palette and aesthetic sensibilities for that. But what you can do as a composer with this idiom is like melodies can be fixed, rhythms can be fixed, those things can be notated, those can be written on a page, those can be translated into really simple, lightweight MIDI data that can be sequenced through the synths. And it almost creates like, I felt like getting the fader host module was kind of the bridge to like link the notated scored staff notation into this world of like whatever sounds you want to make at that time. So that's one thing, is that like every time we were rehearsing this music together, it's completely different each time. And so like the version of Fourvox you heard here is like, it's never going to sound like that again. And when I go to like record it for the record, it's going to be a totally different piece. And like same goes for Dan's recording of my piece. And that's just going to be like how it is. So you kind of just have to know when to say, all right, this sounds good. Like I'm happy with this, and this is a version of this piece. And when like, you know, if somebody watching wants to like fire the same MIDI data through their synth and they're like, oh, I can do a better job than that, I'm okay, then please do. Yeah, please do. And like, let me hear what it sounds like, because I'm super curious about that.
So you have a record, you have an entire album of these notated pieces coming with Daniel?
Yeah. That'll be on our record label. Our label is called slashsound. You can find it at slashsound.bandcamp or slashsound.net. And it's I mean, the label is kind of in general like a collection of music that is maybe created or produced by people who have gone through the classical music circuit that don't really feel welcome or at home in the conservative academia, and like they're doing something that's like a little bit more aesthetically out of place. Even though they have like the classically trained backing. So like there's a little bit of indie rock, there's a bit of vaporwave, there's some free improvised music, and there's some like straight ahead techno also. So that would be where that will come out. I think we still need to record the rest of the music, and I think I don't know if we have a whole record's worth of collaborators yet. So I think we need to invite a few more friends to write some more music for us.
Yeah, so we're probably looking at a project 2021.
It'll be a 2021 project, yeah.
Awesome.
I'll let you know when it's ready to listen to.
Very cool. Well, I think that's probably all we have time for. Adam, thank you so much for being...
This was a lovely conversation.
It was, I loved it, and I loved your pieces, and I'm so glad that you were able to get this done, particularly in the midst of moving and all the upheaval in your life.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, I wanted to make it a priority because like I'm really grateful to be on here. I've so much respect for noise engineering, like as a creative force, like within this idiom too. So I'm really happy you invited me. And
thank you.
I wanted to do a good job for y'all.
You did an amazing job. We're so grateful to have you. We're so happy that you were able to get everything, like I said, in the midst of all of this upheaval, and we really appreciate it. And until next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we are here with Normandy Falls. Norm, that was, as always, that was a really incredible set. So first thing I always like to do is ask people to walk us through what you did, because I know everybody in the chat wants to know.
Absolutely, yeah. And thank you, and thanks for having me on. So that patch was a fun one for me, especially, I got a chance to try to make some sounds that I had never made before. I had actually sat down and started patching the way that I always do. And, instead of really pushing anything, just knowing, okay, well, this goes into this filter and so on. And I started going and ended up being very uninspired by what I was creating. So I decided to take a little bit of a different approach this time. And I started with the ataraxic and started tuning it and playing with it and really trying to hone in a sound with just that module instead of, a lot of times when I start, I'll try to make like either a beat or start tuning oscillators together. But this time I went with just the sound of that and I ended up with this almost like a car plus strong string sound to it, which is something I had never really gotten from it before. So that's what you're going to hear with a lot of the almost like a string sounds. I was using the ataraxic and the manus as my two main voices. The manus was really cool because I did the same thing with that, was started trying to come up with a different sound that I'd never heard before. And by running it through a high pass filter, and I split my envelope so that it would go into the envelope in the manus, and then also the envelope into the manus, and then also into the filter. I was using the Morgasmatron on a high pass filter and ended up with this almost piano sounding effect from it, which was really cool and something I'd never gotten before. So using those two as my main voices, I'm using the cursus for all of the bass lines. The Basilius for a kick, which for me, I know this is going to sound weird, but for me, I've never used that as a kick before. I've always used it for percussive sounds and, just gnarly things. But I've never used it as just a straight kick. So that was a new one for me as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the piano sounds out of the manus really surprised me. For those of you who didn't catch it, Norm managed to make a Piano Man cover that we posted on our stories a while ago with just the manus,
Mm-hmm.
the manus sound of the piano. It was pretty great. So you started with the AI though. That the ataraxic is, we describe it as our most aggressive oscillator. So it's an interesting place for me to hear you say you started, because that's sort of the antithesis of how I would describe your sound. So why start with the AI?
The AI has always been, ever since it came out, it's been one of my favorites. I really like it, and a big reason that I started with it was I knew that I wanted that to be one of the voices, and I knew I wanted the manus to be the other one. And my OCD kind of takes over in this part. So I had my three voices lined up, and I knew that the Basilius wasn't going to be used as a voice, and I put them in alphabetical order in the top left of my case. So to be honest, that's why I started with the ataraxic, because it was ataraxic cursus manus. So I'll blame my OCD for starting with that.
I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that you alphabetize your modules, because I have also done this. Okay, so I know you're born and raised in Michigan.
Yes.
And then, so we typically talk a bit about the meanderings of each performer and how they sort of inform the music that you make. So from Michigan, I know you're in Texas now. We met when you
Yes.
lived here. So
Yes.
fill in the blanks a bit and how that informs the music that you make.
Sure. Yeah, born and raised in Michigan. I left Michigan after high school, which was the late 90s. Went to Florida for a little while, then went back to Michigan to finish up school. From there, moved to Texas, Texas to Los Angeles, and then Los Angeles just back to Texas a couple of years ago. I think growing up in Michigan, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, the rave scene around there was definitely a big influence on my music. I grew up, I was about an hour and a half from Detroit. So not living in the city, but close enough to where, every weekend we could head down and go catch shows. A lot of the stuff back then, there were a couple bars that were doing stuff, but a lot of it was also house parties and stuff like that. I got into DJing, mostly house parties and smaller parties like that. And it was kind of strange. Even though being in Detroit, and I got a lot of this actually from living in Florida, was a UK influenced music. A lot of like the late 90s, early 2000s UK hard house and new energy, which is really, it's odd talking about Michigan and Florida, but that's what all the people I knew were listening to, and that's what we really were always playing. But I think that had a big influence on me, especially with electronic music. And then, but it's funny because that's really aggressive music, and then now I'm playing, a lot of my stuff is a lot more melodic. But I think still that feeling, that driving, even though a lot of times I'll do ambient music, I still have a kick in there. I'll have some sort of driving rhythm. And I think that really comes from that old UK hard house.
How did you make the transition to such more melodic stuff? Why that?
It's I'm not sure exactly how. It wasn't intentional, to be honest. I've learned that when I sit down and play music, I do better if I don't think I'm going to sit down and I'm going to make a techno song, or I'm going to sit down and work on ambient. I just kind of, every time I do that, I end up making something totally different. So I've kind of given up on that and just start patching. And, I've noticed that, the modular will kind of bring out what it wants to bring out. And I think that, whatever I'm feeling at the time has a lot to do with it, but I'll start listening to different tones and listening to things and then figuring out how they're going to go together. And then that just kind of forms into a piece.
We've talked a lot, you and I. Like, I know you have. It's not. There's not a lot behind you right now, but I know you have quite an extensive synth collection. What got you into? How did you end up with modular?
Yeah, the modular stuff, for me, it was very intimidating at first. I came from actually an acoustic background, playing drums in various bands. The last band I was in broke up, and I got tired of trying to get 5 or 6 people together and dealing with schedules and drama and personality issues and all of that, and just decided, okay, I want to do stuff on my own. Obviously, nobody wants to listen to a 2-hour drum solo, so I need to find something besides the drums.
I might.
Well, maybe every now and then, but not all the time. So that's, and having that background of DJing and electronic music, I was like, okay, I'm going to try producing. So I started getting into keyboard synths and drum machines. and modular always kind of scared me. And then, I was watching a lot of Instagram videos with Patrick O'Brien, Red Stripe Down, Banna, and Eric. A lot of people that were really prominent in, right around 2015, 2014, 2015. And I started deciding, okay, I'm gonna give this modular thing a try, and went back and forth on, do I want to buy a system, like a shared system, or something complete, or piece my own together. And I just got super, super lucky and came across it was primarily a Verbo system on eBay.
Nice.
And I remember I ended up getting it on the 23rd of December, like right before Christmas. And it, had a Metropolis sequencer, 2 Verbos oscillators, an envelope, a filter. So it had everything, but it wasn't a full case. It was a 6U, and it had some openings, which was cool because then I could start kind of filling in my own stuff, but it had enough to get going. And it's the weirdest thing. Like, my brain just clicked with modular, and like, I really felt, okay, this is my instrument. This is how I'm going to express myself. Like, it took a lot of learning. It wasn't immediate, but I just felt comfortable with it. And I felt like, very inspired to really work with it. So I started checking out every video I could about synthesis in general, learning, okay, what does a filter do? And what does an envelope do? And the modular kind of broke it down more to me. Like with the keyboard stuff, I mean, I knew what happened when I turned the knob that said envelope, or for, the attack or something like that, but I didn't really know what it did. I knew what it did to the sound, but I didn't know what it did as far as synthesis goes.
Mm-hmm.
So modular really got me into synthesis as a whole, and pulling apart all the different pieces and being like, okay, why does it change the sound? If I turn the attack open more, why is it slowly coming up? What's behind that? And I feel like that's when modular really took off for me, was learning each of those pieces and really understanding what it does. And then that's when I feel like I got comfortable to where I could play instead of thinking about like, okay, what do I have to do? I could just kind of go, okay, I know that this will do this, and this is where the sound that I want to have. So we're going to run it through like a high pass filter instead of a low pass or something like that.
Very cool. So I know that once you got very into it, you were in search of community. You were one of the co-founders of Modular on the Spot Austin. You want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a ton of fun. Unfortunately, it was 4 of us that put together the first couple ones. I moved shortly after it got started, so I think we put on 3 or 4 before I moved. But that was myself and Matt Henner from Arl Canyon, which is it's a great modular ambient label in Austin. Granger Weston and Brian Gary, the 4 of us orchestrated, and we got a spot at a park. It was really cool. This was the first time that I ended up really reaching out to the modular community, and got a hold of Banna and Eric and talked to them about, hey, I really want to do a modular on the spot in Austin, but want to make sure, and just got the greatest response ever. I mean, they were just like, yes, absolutely, let's do this. That's great that you want to do it. We're totally down. They sent me, a bunch of stickers, and we were chatting, and that was the first time that I realized how open the modular community is, and that it's not a competition. Being in rock bands and other genres of music, there's a lot of times where people are like, no, that's our thing. This is, it's a competition between the artists. I've never gotten that from the modular community. So I think that that's really cool. I mean, and then putting on those modular on the spots. I mean, we met so many people that would drive up from Houston.
Wow.
You know, we had people from all over coming up and saying, hey, you know, we saw your post, we just want to introduce myself, I play modular too. And we're like, okay, great, let's get you on one of these, you know. And it was a ton of fun. Hopefully, you know, we'll get going on those again once you know, it's safe to have those events.
Yeah, for sure. I miss them here in Los Angeles. I have said we owe an enormous debt of gratitude to Eric and Banna for starting that as essentially a global phenomenon at this point. I think they have really shown globally what a phenomenon modular can be, and, you know, made such a community. I've had people from other continents contacting me, asking me what the community is like here, because they have no community there, and it's really hard to get modular. And so it's really, I'm really grateful to them for having started modular on the spot and making it something that's so replicable. You know, it's such an easy model for people to put on in other places, more or less easy. Yeah. I mean, you know, generator, speakers, you know, like,
yeah,
caveats. Yeah, in any case, I really agree with you that there's a really tremendous community within modular. I feel like we talked about this a lot on the frequency shift episode, that women have been traditionally very much underrepresented within modular. I feel like that has gotten better, dramatically better, since I started doing this. But I'm curious what the perspective is from where you're sitting.
Yeah, and I think,
I mean, and diversity in general, not just women, just diversity in general within modular.
sure. You know, I think that it's getting better. I think that as a community, we still have a long ways to go, but I'm glad that people are at least talking about it. You know, and it's weird because it wasn't that long ago, but 5 years ago, I don't feel like it was really discussed even. So I'm glad that people are talking about it. The one thing that I'm hopeful for is that people's actions will actually start talking and not just their mouths. I think it's important not to just talk about it, but to really be aware of it and be aware of your actions, and, you know, think about, okay, is this, am I either excluding people? And, you know, it doesn't need to be that it's on purpose. It doesn't matter what your intentions are. I mean, if you have good intentions, but you're being exclusive, they're not good intentions. So I just think that people really need to think about their actions and, you know, remember that we're all in this together. You know, I think the modular community is really good at bringing people together.
Yeah.
And I think that as a community in a whole, we just need to also be aware, are we excluding people directly or indirectly? Sometimes you can exclude people indirectly and maybe not even realize it, but I think it's, as members of the community, it's all of our responsibility to be inclusive of everybody, you know, whether it be sex, race, creed, I mean, all of it. You know, we're all in this crazy world together. And I think that we, you know, have done a good job of promoting community. I always hear people in the modular community talk about our community. And we just need to remember to, you know, that we are all family, and to have our actions speak that as well as our words.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. So this feels like a complete non sequitur after something quite so heavy, but I guess you have a release scheduled for December. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. This is going to be on Serendipia Records out of Barcelona, Spain. We have it scheduled for December. Hopefully, we'll see how the world's turning by then. So that's what we're shooting for, though. This one's really special for me. So it was the last time I played Madra on the Spot in Los Angeles. It was March of 2019, and I played a set and went home and was like, wow, this got a great response. It ended up that it was like 2 20-minute pieces, so perfect for a tape release. Recorded it, got it mixed and mastered, and so that was a year and a half ago. So very excited. Been sitting on this for a little while, but very excited to have that out this December.
And where will people be able to find that?
I'll have some copies on my Bandcamp. Serendipia will have copies on theirs. And then I haven't quite figured out if we're going to do a digital release or how, as far as streaming goes. It's a little bit tough with the 2 20-minute pieces. I'm not sure if we're going to edit it into tracks. So we're still working out the digital part, but we'll definitely have some tapes come December.
Awesome. Well, Normandy Falls, Norm, thank you so much for being on the Noiseblast Hour, sponsored by Noise Engineering. Such a mouthful.
Yeah.
We really appreciate your time. We appreciate having you on and the awesome set you put together for us. And till next time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was fun, and I always love watching these. So thank you again for having me on.
And this concludes the 8th episode of the Noiseblast Hour, sponsored by Noise Engineering. If you like what you heard, make sure that you like and subscribe down below so that you never miss an episode of the Noiseblast Hour. See you next time.